December the 17th, 2019. And to start the official proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Jara country, which the members and elders of the Jara community and their forebears have been custodians for many centuries and have performed age-old ceremonies of celebration, initiation and renewal. We acknowledge their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region. And to let everyone know, council meetings are audio and video recorded and are made available to the public via electronic media, including YouTube. So I have 7 councillors present, no apologies. Councillors, do I have any declarations of interest or conflict of interest regarding tonight's agenda? No, thank you. Move on to the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes to confirm: special meeting of Council 19th of November 2019 and the ordinary meeting of Council 19th.
I'll move those the minutes, and I recommend that the minutes of the special and ordinary meeting of the Mount Alexander Shire Council held on the 19th of November 2019 be confirmed.
Thank you, Councillor Lesser. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Petruska. There being no opposition, I declare the matter carried. So that quickly takes us on to public question time. So we'll start by asking for a motion to suspend standing orders, Councillor Neiman, and seconded by Councillor Lesser. So I see we have a large gallery tonight, which is always good. And I will, of course, read the rules and say that public question time is to enable members of the public to ask questions or to address council. Standing orders have been suspended to allow this to happen. The local law allows 30 minutes with extension by a resolution of council. We'll listen to you with respect, and we ask that you speak with respect to us in return. There are matters that are not allowed to raise, such as matters relating to outside the duties, functions and powers of council, or anything that's defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, all those nasty things, aimed at embarrassing a councillor or member of staff, or relates to personnel matters, industrial or contractual matters. So we're aiming for mutual respect, which we always do. Public question time is recorded in the minutes of the meeting, so we ask you to state your name clearly, and if you're representing yourself or group or organisation, and the topic on which you wish to speak. Now, I'm expecting people to want to speak on a number of items this evening, so I intend to go through the agenda and select people to speak on those items as they are set out in the agenda. But first of all, I'm asking, is there anyone here who wishes to raise a matter with council that's outside of tonight's agenda? Yes, sir. Would you like to come to the lectern?
Oh, here. Thank you.
I have 3 minutes. I should remember. Sorry, your name?
My name is Peter Morris.
Peter Morris.
And I'd like to firstly congratulate you on the pedestrian crossing in Forest Street, which leads to my question: is it possible to have such a crossing at the Wesley Hill Market between there and where the parking is on the other side of the road, on the south side of the road? It's becoming very dangerous on a Saturday morning, especially for older people, to make the way right across the road in one go, considering the amount of traffic that's on the road. Is that a possibility?
Thank you. I think I'd better hand that to our Director of Infrastructure and Development, Mr. Yusovich.
Thank you, Peter. I'll take that one on notice and see what our plans are, because we do have a 5-year plan for capital works. I'll just check whether that's on. I assume you filled out one of these forms?
I did.
We'll get back to you in the next few days. Just
Thank
to see
you very
whether
much.
Yeah, and
Thank you. Certainly a very busy place for a Saturday morning. Yes, Ms. Young, would you like to?
Should I be pleased to say?
Yeah, if you've got something to say that's not on the agenda for tonight.
Well, no, it's something on the agenda.
Okay, well, we'll wait till that one comes around if that's all right. Anyone else who wants to raise something that's not on the agenda? I've got a number of people. Do you want to speak separately, or are you coming up together? Okay, please do. Technically, you have 3 minutes each.
No. It's an old trick. We promise. Chris Johnston. My name is Deb Wardle.
Deb Shaw.
and we're here as Green Gully residents, and we've got a question, but a little bit of background first, if that's okay now, 3 minutes. So the Green Gully community has been seeking a review and reduction in the speed limit on the Pyrenees Highway between Muckleford South through to Newstead since 2015. We've had letters, submissions and meetings. The proposed installation of the wire rope barriers, which everyone knows about, and removal of vegetation, that was announced in February 2015, and that was really the catalyst for the community getting together again. Since then we've done many things. We're really concerned about the section through Green Gully where there's more than 40 households that access the highway directly or from Cemetery Road, Bodles Road, Stevens Road or Cusacks Road, and issues of safety, near misses, wildlife strife around this cluster of intersections. But the Newstead community also through Newstead 2021 has expressed its concerns through that proposed project, including about speed limit. It's a 4.4 section of the highway, so it's not very long. It's from the bridge over Muckleford Creek to the east of Symes Road through to Newstead. There's already double lines, extensive curves, line crests, and a number of advisory speed signs that are at 80, 70, 75. The speed limit's 100 between Castlemaine and Green Gully, and then 90 from Green Gully to Newstead. So our view is that the extent of advisory signs and double lines and all of these things really says 100's too fast for that road. The community put together a petition that went to Marie Edwards back in January 2019, and that was tabled in Parliament with more than 500 signatures, and it asked for, amongst other things, reassessment of the speed limit along that section. We've engaged with Vic Roads from 2015 to 2019 through the consultation processes they ran, but also in relation to Newstead 2021 also initiated a whole series of meetings. At the last meeting in June 2019, Vic Roads undertook to do a review of the speed limit, placement of signs and wildlife signs, and to consult with the Green Gully community. This hasn't happened, and I guess that's why we're here tonight, to really ask Council for your support. So I'd just like to hand to Deb to put forward what we're really asking Council for, and we'll give you a copy of this material.
So we have 3 questions. The first one is to ask, are you able to support us in our requests to Vic Road for a reduction in speed limit to 80 k's on this 4.4 kilometre section of the Pyrenees Highway? Second one is to work with and support the Green Gully and Newstead residents as we work with Vic Roads to establish a review of the speed limits. And thirdly, the speed limits and the associated signage. And the third thing is to ensure that the results of any Vic Roads review, that we don't know if they've done it, on this section of the highway are made public, and whatever the outcome, they are presented and explained to the community. So there are 3
Thank you very much.
for support.
Now, obviously we can't respond completely this time, but I think I might ask for
Thank you.
You're going to hand it all back to Mr. Yosipovich.
Thank you. We can absolutely contact Vic Roads just to see where the process is at, and certainly support the review. I'm not sure what Vic Roads policy, or Roads Victoria now, I'm not sure what their policy is in terms of releasing their review publicly, but I can find out. So at this stage, that's probably all I can answer in terms of that, but we've got your details. Once I've made contact with Rural Roads Victoria, I'll write to you guys and let you know how I went.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. Anyone else want to talk to us, raise an issue that's not on tonight's agenda? Yes, yes please, one more.
Hello, my name is Leah Moyoffi. I'm a resident of Barker's Creek, and I would like to know, will Council be opening any halls for refuge when a Code Red Day is called and residents in outlying regions are asked to leave their properties regardless of whether there is a fire, as open open areas will not be appropriate places due to the risk of heat exhaustion.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, would you be able to respond? Director in charge of this emergency service.
Thank you. In the event of a code red and other extreme weather events, there are emergency relief centres that are opened. There's also neighbourhood safer places and places of last resort. They will be communicated via media, ABC radio, in the event of whether it be code red and any other extreme weather conditions. So there's clear, documented and agreed protocol. Mount Alexander Shire Council is part of the Northern Victorian Emergency Management Cluster. So that's coordinated, and that's across 5 different councils, because we may have staff heading off to Loddon or staff from Central Goldfields coming over here to help, depending on what the needs of each community are. So those actions are already in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Good. I think I'm now going to go through the agenda, and if you want to speak on that item, please put up your hand. So the first one is our customer service policy and charter. So, Victorian Local Government Association Child-Friendly Cities and Communities Charter endorsement. Intention to dispose of former Tooten Community Centre at 201 Main Road, Tooten. Mr. Hall, please.
Hi, my name's Phil Hall. The first time that this situation arose, I spoke to a lot of people in Tooten. The timing was rather awkward to get a lot of people in Tooten together to discuss and decide what they wanted to do about this situation. And it seems to me that council's processes haven't really changed in that regard. Tonight you're probably going to vote to put it back on the market now that you've had the delay and you have to go through the process again. I'm here basically to inform council that there are many residents in Tooten who are growing in their frustration about this latest ripping off of Tooten by the council and our assets and our heritage, and to ask whether council has any interest whatsoever in delaying the announcement of the sale of the property and doing some proper community consultation, and also in the process of doing so, giving the community time to gather and get together. This is obviously a very difficult time of year to be able to do that. So the timing is also yet again appalling. I know that many people in Tooten would rather see not only the Wesleyan Church, but Sunday school, in fact the whole precinct, being handed back to the community. And there are people that also don't agree with the assessment of costs to do up the church, and people who are quite willing to fundraise and crowd fundraise and do anything they need to do to get our community centre back into the hands of the Tooten community. I would say that this is a subject which is also considered to be something of a decision by council, and the way it's being done to hide the long history of mismanagement of that place and the community, Section 86 community, who were in charge of it for a while. We think there are other opportunities, and I think most of the community would agree with that, but it's hard to get them all together to show you that right now, but I'm sure it will happen down the track.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Response? I don't know, talk about what's the process before us tonight, whether you want to talk about that now or that comes up in the debate.
I can certainly talk about the process, but I can't talk about what council may or may not decide.
Sure. If you could just elaborate on the process that's
Sure.
before us tonight. Thank you.
So just as a bit of background and context, I guess, council resolved in 2017 from memory, after going through a community submission process, resolved to subdivide the land and sell the land. So probably from a legal reason and a strictly legal perspective, there is no reason for us to bring this report back to council. But given the passage of time of 2 years or so, we felt it was important that people get another opportunity to have their say on the proposal. It took us a bit longer than we anticipated to undertake all the works that we needed to do to effect that subdivision. So 2 years has passed. We think from a governance perspective it's a much better idea to give the committee another opportunity to make formal submissions. So the decision before council tonight is whether or not to issue a public notice on its intent to sell, not to sell. And then there's a formal process under the Local Government Act for any member of the community to make a submission. Council then has a duty to review those submissions before it makes its final decision. In terms of the timing, and given that we are leading up to Christmas, we're absolutely well aware of that. The minimum time required legally is 28 days, but we're not proposing to issue this notice till the new year, given that it is Christmas. So we'll issue or publish a public notice probably mid-January, I'd suggest, somewhere in there.
Thank you very much. That clarifies the process before us tonight. Anyone else speaking on that? No? Good. Move on to the sealing of Brown, Butterworth and Parsworth Street. Okay, so I've got 1, 2 people. Can we, do you all right? I might take, can we limit you to 3, do you think? Are you able to? No, okay, we've got 4. Come on then. Well, maybe I'll take the gentleman at the back first. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Gerard Condon and I'm speaking to you on behalf of myself and Michael Rigg. We're both residents of Brown Street. And we wish to give conditional support to Council's proposal. Without having seen the actual plans, our conditional support is based on retaining the current alignment of the road, retaining the existing trees to both native and established oaks on the road and other roadside vegetation. No change to the small bluestone bridge outside number 13 Brown Street, and no curbing or guttering on the footpath in Brown Street. So basically our support is just that the current dirt section is just tarmac down the middle and everything else is pretty much left. We wanted the road sealed for reasons of dust control and public safety. The steepness of Brown Street makes walking down it quite hazardous, particularly for older residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person. Yes, please.
Hello, my name's Claire Reynolds. I'm a resident of Butterworth Street, and I'd like to talk about an objection to the sealing of the road. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the importance of a semi-rural character to Castlemaine as a whole. This sealing is a precedent that will impact on all of the other roads that are unsealed in Castlemaine. I've come from the city, I bought here and have chosen to be here for over a decade because it's not like the city. I bought into this semi-rural feel and I really value it and I'd like it to continue. And that means not having every road sealed, having gravel in some spaces and not having curb and channel everywhere. I'd also like to talk about, I've read the report, I'm a landscape architect and I have a very good understanding of road construction. I design roads in urban spaces. I'm worried that the risk to the trees is being downplayed in the report. I've brought along today an aerial photograph from 1946 of Butterworth Street, which I'll table, and it has the trees on that site existing, and they're clearly there, probably 95, 100 years, maybe older. These are part of our heritage, our natural heritage in Castlemaine, and not considering them from the beginning as important assets to the whole community, I think is actually a mistake. The change of a road surface is they're going to argue from engineering that the impact on the root zone has already been happening because of the road. But they will need to excavate the existing road to build, and this may impact on any roots that are below the road. Some of these trees are close to 1 metre diameter. When we calculate the tree protection zone, you times that by 12. So we're talking about 24 metres wide. Big protection zones. And then within that, there's also a critical root zone, which is where we can't damage, or these trees will fall down. The other thing that can happen when we're building a new road is we change drainage. And when we do that, trees that are 100 years old have been used to and have grown their roots in a spot where they can collect that water. So as we make these changes, we might not see them fall down in 5 years' time, but we want to see them still in our community in 50 years' time. So I think that that's a really important thing that needs to be taken on board if we're any consideration on any of the 3 roads for road sealing. But I would reiterate that the local character of the dirt roads is actually valuable to Castlemaine. The lifestyle of living on a dirt road balances the needs of pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles really well. We have a local echidna that goes up and down the street, a whole lot of wood ducks. It's also, this particular space is a destination for dog walkers in summer because it doesn't burn their feet.
Yeah, we'll have to.
Okay. I'll hand over a couple of
Thank
things.
you. You've made a very good point. Thank you. Next speaker. Yes, Mr. Planter.
My name's Margaret Tanter. I live in Butterworth Street, Castlemaine, and I'm opposed also to the council's proposal to put bitumen on parts of Butterworth, Brown and Farnsworth Streets. There are, I think, if I've counted right, there are 12 other people also here tonight to show their opposition to this proposal, right, Mr. Tory speaking. The proposal would destroy vegetation and the character of the area and decrease road safety, especially for pedestrians. I see these roadsides as part of a wildlife corridor of remnant indigenous vegetation linking the bush along the Malden railway line with Campbell's Creek. Many people who live in and walk on the roads value the beauty and biodiversity of this area and see it as a precious asset. The report in the agenda gives as a justification for the proposal the number of service requests, complaints I mean, relating to the roads and drainage. But there is no estimate of how many times residents have experienced joy from living in such a beautiful area, but haven't thought to ring council every so often to express their gratitude. For leaving things be and allowing what we value to be preserved. If we did do this, you might have to employ another receptionist to process the thanks. The report on pages 39 to 40 mentions road safety as another reason to seal the roads. All vehicles, including cars, trucks and graders, are a risk to their occupants and other road users. But how is a slow-moving grader and occasionally other equipment, used about twice a year during less busy times, more of a threat to safety than a permanent increase in other traffic going faster amongst pedestrians? The legal liability for road deaths and injuries would be then shifted away from council, but should the main consideration be legal liability or should it be the safety of residents and road users? Where there are genuine problems with the roads, such as gravel washing down Farnsworth Street, I'd like alternative solutions sought from the community as well as from the engineers. I don't want the 3 roads lumped together with a one-size-fits-all approach done with a destructive sledgehammer. Tonight I urge councillors to vote against the recommendation to endorse the project because of the negative effect on residents and vegetation, and instead seek individual solutions to any individual problems.
Next speaker on this item. Mr. Yeoman, did you want to speak on this item? Yes. Please. Mr. Payne.
Yes, Frank Panter. the thing that I was a bit worried about was the report. It sort of implies that the thing has to be considered as just one project, whereas in fact it's quite obvious that it's 3 separate projects, because the report with its traffic count implies that there's this certain traffic going down, which I estimate to be about 13 vehicles per hour, which isn't much actually. But I am sure that the traffic in Brown Street, in that section of Brown Street, would be a handful of cars per day. And same with Farnsworth Street. So each particular area has a separate problem. So I read about the idea of a survey, and if that's done, we need to separate the 3 areas in that survey so that we get somewhere. So I'd commend the council to oppose the ceiling. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that's it for Butterworth, Brown and Farnsworth. Yes, so move on to, we have a planning permit for both, but now we don't hear planning permit pros and cons at a council meeting. We have a separate meeting with the applicant and the objectors, and it happens prior to this. It provides a clear flow of information for all concerned. So that's taken place. We'll just councillors make their decision tonight on that item. The next one being our Audit and Risk Advisory Committee meeting. I don't think anyone's going to speak to us about that. Awarding a contract for Bendigo Sutton Grange Road reconstruction works. Does anyone wish to speak to us about that? It's a contract matter, so right, so they can't really speak to us about that. No, sorry, got that wrong. Got my old plates on still. So that brings us to a notice of motion. Climate emergency. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to us about that? Yes, please, would you like to come forward?
No, I don't. Hello, I'm Neve. I'm 17 and I go to Castlemaine Secondary College. I'd like to deliver a message on behalf of School Strike for Climate and all of the students in this council who have spoken before on this. We don't have long before we run out of time. This week we're predicted to hit 50 degrees, not here in Castlemaine, but other places in the country. Due to the heat wave, due to rising temperatures from rising CO2 emissions, which is all contributing to the climate crisis, which we call climate change, but we need to declare a climate emergency to acknowledge that this is a crisis, and we need to act as if we are in a crisis and we are in an emergency, because the leaders, our federal leaders, our state leaders aren't doing anything. Nothing is happening. You have the opportunity to declare a climate emergency and start down the path to making a change and stopping the impacts of climate change. Thank you.
Councillors, we've reached the maximum time allotted, so assuming we want to go on and hear more people, could I have a motion to extend public question time for another 10 minutes?
Well, it's going to questions. We've done public consultation. Do we need to hear more on this issue?
Well, Mr. Yeoman wishes to speak. Maybe can we have 10 minutes? Maximum?
I'll move that we extend question time by 10 minutes if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Petrushna, seconded by Councillor Layton.
Right. My name is Irene Yeoman. I live at Golden Point, and I've been on this earth for nearly 7 decades. So I think I've seen a little bit of climate weather myself. However, that introduction leads me to, I vehemently object to Council declaring a so-called climate emergency. As a ratepayer, I do not, I object. However, that leads me to another point. I was listening to an interview of Mayor Henderson with Fiona Parker, and I got the impression that the decision had already been made by council from her interview. I may have got it wrong. However, the other point she made was that council was, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that Mayor Henderson stated that council would be purchasing an electric grader. I may have got that wrong, however, I'd like to be corrected if that is the case. And the other thing is that the climate emergency is an empty gesture that simply aligns us with Melbourne progressive councils. That's all I'd have to say. But I'd like your response, please, Meg.
Certainly, Lucia. I think I made the remark that one of the challenges of trying to aiming for zero net emissions would be not so much to cut down our use of static electricity in buildings, etc., but in our transport power, like generating greenhouse gases from use of fuels such as petrol and diesel. And I said that we can contemplate using hybrid or electric cars, but then I said it's hard to imagine being able to use an electric grader. So I was actually identifying...
No, it's going to have to be fossil fuel, is it?
No, I don't know. I'm pretty familiar with graders just from watching them go past my house twice a year if I'm lucky. And I was finding it difficult to visualise what an electric grader would look like. So that's what I was saying. I was pointing out that there were sticking points that were big challenges.
I might have missed some of your points when you were talking to Fiona Parker, but I was most intrigued with your interview with her. I just still got an impression that the decision's already been made. I'd like to add that the whole community engagement forum, creating workshops for different sessions, is simply led to the fact that it was obviously intended that the council is going to vote, and I know before I even walk out the door, when the decision is going to be made, you're going to vote on declaring a climate emergency. I know from past experience with previous workshops, you've already made the decision, and and as I and hundreds of other critical ratepayers find that decisions seem to be made in back rooms, and it's not real engagement, it's pretend engagement. I find it just, I really don't like it.
It did go over 12 hours. Everyone was invited to join. Everyone was invited to join, and the place was open to anyone to come and go. Thank you very much. I'm not holding a question and answer session with you now. I'm just making a final statement.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, I've had my piece to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your response.
Thank you.
I think it's fair to say, though, Mayor, that in terms of that question, there was no No, and it's probably still fair to say, sitting around this table, we don't know what the outcome will be until it happens.
Thank you.
Just for clarification,
Yeah.
there's no deal.
Pig's fly too.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to us on this matter? No? All right. Well, we've only started in that case. Thank you very much. Could I have a motion to resume standing orders? That's what we do. Thank you, Councillor Rachel and Councillor Corey. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is petitions and joint letters. We've received a joint letter on the 22nd of November from residents concerned about the eradication of bees in botanic gardens. Do I have a motion for Councillor? Thank you, Councillor Rachel.
That Council receive a report on this joint letter at the next ordinary meeting of Council on 18 February 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Leeman. No opposition. What have I got? Assemblies of committee reports. No, assemblies of councillors. A number of assemblies of councillors here. Yes, Councillor Lasser.
I recommend and I move the motion that Council notes the records of the assemblies of councillors as required under the Local Government Act 1989.
Thank you. A seconder for that one. Councillor Cordy, thank you. Any opposition? Thank you. Okay, the motion carried. And moving on to the next one, which is our officer reports. The first one being customer service policy and charter.
Yes, move it as printed.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, seconded. Councillor Machin. Is there any opposition? No? Would you like to speak on the matter, Councillor Gardner?
Look, this probably isn't a sexy one considering what else is on the agenda. Look, I mean, the intent of this policy is very important, though. It's about the commitment and how we engage and deal with and respond to our community. And this sets out clear standards and expectation. And it's the first time that that's sort of been set as a standard, and I know that we as councillors and executive will be monitoring our staff to ensure that they meet the timeframes.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Machin.
Thank you, and I'd like to acknowledge that our staff already do a fabulous job. I've seen them in action in our reception area. I've seen very quick responses to emails, and I've seen a real pick-up in responses to addressing issues anywhere. And I'm trying to keep up with that standard being set by our staff by responding as quickly as I possibly can when I get questions from the community. It is important that we have that standard so that we can measure ourselves and can measure our success and can learn from that. And it's really good to see this, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Machin. Any other councillor wish to speak on this matter? All right. Well, there being no opposition, I declare the matter carried and look forward to the implementation of our new customer service policy and charter. And the next item is the Victorian Local Government Association Child-Friendly Cities and Communities Charter endorsement.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move the motion that Council endorses the Victorian Local Government Association's Victorian Child-Friendly Cities and Communities Charter.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Do I have a seconder for that one? Councillor Machin. Any opposition? No. Councillor Lesser, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I do, Mayor. I have given this one a bit of thought. Okay. Empowering children to become valued and engaged citizens within their communities. That's a powerful statement of intent. And Council and the community recently saw this in action when primary school children gave a presentation to Council, as well as participating in the Climate Change Forum and even in one of our young people speaking here tonight. The endorsement of this charter is an action in the Mount Alexander Early Years Plan and an action through the annual plan. Now, the Early Years Plan vision is to create an innovative and connected community that works together to support our children to reach their full potential using a collective impact model. And these are some of the words in the report. I'm part of the Early Years Steering Group, and I've even got a badge to prove it. Even though the name's spelt wrong, but the intent is there. And I also attended the recent Middle Years Forum. Now, in the attachment to the agenda is this page headed. Involving young people, it's involving children and young people in local government policy. Now, on a personal level, I've enlisted the help of my alter ego, Councillor Pegg, to highlight the extent that local government plays in their lives. Now, child-friendly cities. As a council, we showed our intent in a large physical space, our play space in Victory Park, with what a success, in constant use for a community-connected space. In complete contrast, I visited the Castlemaine Toy Library function over the weekend, an example of the children and the community working together. Now, as a council and a community, we are in this space of creating a child-friendly city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lesser. So I take you endorse the Friendly Cities and Communities Charter.
Absolutely.
And anyone else wish to speak on this matter? You wish to speak, Councillor? Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Lesser, for that inspirational speech. And it was indeed a delight to go past the children's playground and see so many families there. I think this is a very important step. I think honouring our children is a very important thing for us to do. They will be here much longer than we are. And to have their views on the opinions on what we do is also very important. It's one of the questions, so I really endorse this, and it is also one of those questions where I think it would be a really good research project for somebody to say, well, we're meant to also be a welcoming city, a dementia-friendly place, a welcoming zone, and a whole range of things. And part of this is around how do we, as a community, act with respect to everyone. And this is really focusing us on our children, and that's fabulous. And it's also about broadening our heart in many different ways around welcome. So yes, I think this is great, and I support it, councillors.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak? No? Well, there being no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to our next item, which is the intention to dispose of former Chewton Community Centre at 201 Main Road, Chewton. Do I have a motion?
Yes, you do.
Councillor Lesser?
I recommend that and move the motion as noted here that the council notes the council resolution of the 15th of August 2017 in accordance with the sections 189 and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989 publishes a public notice advising of its intention to dispose of the Chewton Community Centre at 205 Main Road, Chewton, and inviting submissions to the proposal. And 3, consider submissions and hear any submitters wishing to be heard at a future meeting of council prior to making a decision on the proposal.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Pachusa, or you have a question?
Yes, my apologies. I know that the Director has indicated that we won't advertise until next year, but I'm wondering whether that could be built into the motion to identify that in fact we as councillors have heard our concerns from our citizens about that. So I'm just wondering whether we could say publishes a public notice advertising of its intention towards the end of January 2020.
So after Main Road, Chewton, we could add the words towards the end of January.
Publishes a public notice advertising of publishes in late January. So after the words publishes.
In late January. Publishes in late January.
A public notice. Just as
are you comfortable with that, Councillor Lesser?
Yes, it's an amendment to the motion. Yes.
Minor technical.
Yes.
I don't think we have to debate it. So I think you could. Okay, thank you, Councillor Machin. Seconded by Councillor Pachusa.
Yep.
And you accept those change
Yep,
additional
no
3 words?
No problem.
Thank you. Good. Is there any opposition? No. Councillor Lesser, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would like to speak to the motion, and our Director actually clarified some of my words, but I'll just reiterate what I in the report. Now, the key understanding of this motion is that Council already made the decision to sell. That wasn't in my time, the former Wesleyan Church in Chewton. But because of the passage of time, a fresh public notice will be advertised of Council's intent, which is what my fellow councillor just mentioned. Now, part 3 of the recommended motion was Council considered submissions and hear any submitters wishing to be heard at a future meeting of Council prior to making a decision on the proposal. And also the councillors, that's us, will consider any submissions received at a future meeting of Council and resolve to sell the land or not at a later meeting. So that's part of that report as well. Now, over the weekend, I attended the Monster Meeting event with two of my fellow councillors, Councillor Petrusna and Councillor Neiman. And we heard many speakers, and they highlighted the previous interactions between council and the community in relation to physical structures. Now on page 33 of their report, there are two headings. And the two headings are retain the building to allow the community time to come up with a strategy to justify the expenditure. And the second heading is gift the building to the community. And finally, on page 34 of the agenda, and this is the point that our director made, due to the lapse of time, council will again undertake public notice of sale and accept public submissions in accordance with section 223 of the Local Government Act, and this is the key, before deciding whether or not to enter into formal agreement for the sale of the land. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lesser. Yeah, Councillor Patricia.
Just really quickly reiterate that the concerns raised by Mr Hall in relation to Chewton residents being able to have a say in it is covered under Part 3, and I urge them that if they have something to submit, that they do so after it's advertised and put it to us and come before us and put their proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Hopefully some clarification. Can I ask the director? Are we able to sell the place as is where is, or do we have to do some work on it?
We can now sell it as is where is. Now that we've completed the subdivision process, separate titles, and all the requirements of the Subdivision Act have been met.
Thank you.
Any other councillor wish to add to the debate or ask another clarifying question? No? All right, well, I did ask if there was any opposition, or maybe I did. Is there any opposition to this vote? No. I declare the matter carried, and I will just reiterate what was said the last time, and I seem to remember having quite an extended meeting with Mr Hall about this item, and I urged him at the time to rally the community and come up with a plan if it was needed by the community to come up with a proposal, because what council would need to see would be some organised group who were interested in taking this on. So I'm looking forward to that process maybe, and I can understand Christmas is not a good time, but there's going to be until at least probably the end of February before we have to close that period, so in that time there might be some inkling of possibility there. Thank you. And so now we move on to the next item, which is Butterworth Street. The ceiling of Brown, Butterworth and Farnsworth Street. So we have a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Yes, Councillor Machin.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. I do have a proposed motion, and that is that Council 1 notes the responses to issues raised by residents in their petition. 2, notes the cost and safety implications associated with current maintenance requirements of the affected roads. 3, consults with residents and interested citizens about the proposed road sealing and drain upgrades for Butterworth, Brown and Farnsworth Streets to enable Council to make a more informed decision at a future Council meeting, and 4, writes to the lead petitioner advising of Council's decision.
Thank you, Councillor Machin. Councillor Patricia, are you seconding that one? Thank you. Is there any opposition to Councillor Machin's motion? No? Would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. The reason that we as councillors are supporting a different motion than that recommended by the officers is that we have all heard the concerns expressed. We also realise that we need to ensure that we've got all residents and all of the interested citizens, which I take to be a lot of the walkers and cyclists. and we need to understand what their concerns are. Now, my own concerns, you know, and I really do see this, is that is a very valued walking place, and that any design that makes it easier for traffic really has to also make it easier for walkers and cyclists, in my own mind. We also know about the very valuable vegetation, and we also know that we need to be retaining water in the landscape. All of these are going to be competing and squishing into a very, very small space. And so there are going to have to be some form of really clever designing and probably compromises in what happens. This is the opportunity for our residents and interested people to have a really good think about, okay, what is it they most value? So I look forward to hearing that and hoping that everyone understands the complexity. It's just a road, just goes past your street, but it's one of those ones that brings a lot of complexity. So I look forward to hearing what our residents think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Trisman.
I'll try to keep it brief. I'm pretty familiar with Butterworth Street. My sister lived in it for a short period of time. There's no conflict of interest. She's been long gone from there, and there's no financial interest anywhere. But I am very familiar with the street, and also Brown Street, Farnsworth Street. I've worked both streets for 23 years. I fully support Councillor Mason's motion, and just to put at ease those that would have liked to have seen it sealed, had we passed that motion, nothing would happen before the 2021-22 budget in any case. So this is not going to delay any. If a decision was ultimately made to seal one or any of those streets, any or all, this decision to consult with the residents and interested parties is not going to in any way delay that. Nothing would happen before 2021 in any case. So I support this motion and hope to hear the feedback from all the residents and various interested parties, and council will then make a further decision based on that.
Thank you, Councillor Petrucci. Councillor Lehman.
I'm coming from a different direction, literally and figuratively, I guess. I use that street, I use Ray Street, as do a lot of people from Newstead and Malden, in entry to the CBD and entry to the hospital and medical stuff. My concern is that if we pave this or if we seal this, it will develop into a rat run to avoid the school crossing. And the school crossing is near Farnsworth Avenue entrance, so we have a inside curve, a T intersection with an inside curve and a hill and a school crossing right in a heap, which strikes me as being a fairly dangerous position, and I wouldn't like to see anything happen that would exacerbate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Newman. Other councillors wishing to speak? No? All right, well, there being no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to the next one, which is planning permit application. Planning permit application for development of 8 dwellings at 6 Saint Street, Castle Lane. And I should highlight that although the title is development of 8 dwellings, that was the name of the original application. In fact, the permit recommendation is for 7 dwellings, because that was negotiated as part of the applicant objector issue. So, given that, Councillor Petrucci, you wish to move this?
I'm happy to move as per the recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded? Do I have a seconder for the planning permit? Thank you, Councillor Cordy. Is there any opposition? No, thank you. We'll wait just until the residents of Farnsworth, Brown and Butterworth Street leave us, and then providing a few seats for those who have been seconded. Thank you. Councillor Petrucci, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only a couple of short things. move the motion as per the recommendation. There's been quite a bit of consultation between the developer and also the objectors, including a meeting before the councillors quite recently to discuss the matter. As a result of the initial meetings and objections, the proposal for 8 units, which was what was applied for, and that's why the heading says 8, was amended to 7 units, and quite a number of the units were rejigged to take into account many of the concerns from the objectors. I do understand that not every concern has been completely allayed, and that there are still some issues outstanding, but I believe that the plans as submitted have gone a very, very long way to addressing most of the objectors and certainly all the main portions of the objections, and the plans as submitted comply with the Planning Act and the building codes. So I support the motion as put.
Thank you, Councillor Patricia. Councillor Cordy? No? Any other councillor wish to speak? No? Well, I declare the motion carried then. Thank you. Moving on, so we now have the audit and initiative advisory committee meeting in November 2019. This is, I've got a motion here to note details. Do I have a motion put by a councillor? Councillor Machin, who was present, I think, or are we passing it to Councillor Lesser?
Yes,
Councillor Lesser, would you like to?
Yes, I move that as the recommendation is that the details of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 14th of November 2019 and that the 20 recommended actions were identified in the payroll internal audit report, and they will be added to the outstanding action report for monitoring and completion.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Machin. Any opposition? Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Lesser?
Yes, just briefly, Mayor. This is a great committee, and plenty of talented people that are good at maths and understanding, and the council staff audit part, they did a whole lot of work to identify and trial some of the protocols that go with the payroll as one of the first items to re-look at how things are, to make sure that everything is correct and above board, which it was. And they identified a few errors, and that's what they're working on. It's mainly in procedural matters. So this report and this committee is doing a great job, and I'm pleased to be part of it together with Councillor Machin. Oh, well, it was anyway, you know.
Thank you, Councillor. Yep, Councillor Machin.
Thank you. I just want to emphasise that the 20 recommendations that were identified were all about procedural matters. They were not about anything to do with fraud. and that's one of the things that's very important for why we have an Audit and Risk Committee. It is people coming in with a really eagle eye and checking whether any of our systems allow anyone to defraud our ratepayers, and we have incredibly cooperative staff who are very willing to find that out themselves, and we get improvements to our systems to ensure that even accidental fraud doesn't happen.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? No? Well, I declare the matter carried. And that takes us to the awarding of contract for Bendigo Sutton Grange Road reconstruction works. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Gardner, sorry, I'm wanting to call you Granger for some reason.
Granger. Not Grange. As printed.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Machin. Is there any opposition? Councillor Cordy. Well, would you like to speak to your motion? Please, Councillor Gardner.
So this is an important part of the road to be upgraded. It's a major road that goes through. The officers have undertaken a tender process in accordance with their agreed process. The funding generally is funded through the Regional Roads Recovery Program, and the amount that we're awarding sort of under that. I'm not sure much else I really want to say about it. I just recommend that it's approved.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Doyle, second, do you wish to speak now or later? Thank you. Councillor Cordy, wish to speak?
Yes, Mayor, thanks for that. This is an important project. My concern is I have some issues with our procurement policy, and I'll take those up in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordy. Councillor Machin.
Thank you, councillors. I understand that the procurement policy is looked at each year and passed by council each year, but it will be coming back to us. This process has been carried out in complete accord with our procurement policy, and as such is utterly defendable, and I support it for a number of reasons. One is that this is the right time for this project to be done, and it's a very important project. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Machin. Yes, Councillor Butchersman.
Yeah, I just want to probably share my concerns with Councillor Cordy. I'm not speaking against, I'm speaking probably for the motion, but I just do want to express my concerns in relation to the procurement policy, and that we need to do some work in that area. But I understand that we have some outside funding that has to be, this road has to be done within a certain period of time to get that funding, and because of the seasonal nature of road work, it needs to be gotten onto. But I will also be looking into the procurement policies and to see if in fact, in some cases, it's a little bit difficult for some of our local contractors to necessarily fulfil correctly. That's a matter for later on.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Butchersman. Thank you. So you've spoken, Councillor Machin. Any other councillor wish to speak on the matter? Well, could I have those in favour of the matter? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. I declare the matter carried.
Can we have a division, please?
Thank you. Call for a division. Those in favour? Councillor Trisma, Gardner, Lehman, Machin and Lesser. Those against? Oh, sorry, I forgot to vote. I'm going to put my hand up. Henderson, and those against? Councillor Cordy. Thank you. Thank you for voting on that. Right. Oh, that must be about it. I don't know. Delegates report. Delegates report. This is where the CEO and the Mayor report on the activities that they've been engaged in outside of this meeting, and normal gatherings of councillors between for the last month. So I'll hand over to the CEO, who's been very busy when he got back from holiday.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I'm going to be very quick because I'm almost certain the crowd is not waiting to hear you and I talk about what we've been doing. There's a matter after that they'd really like to get onto. I'd just like to say a very quick thank you to Phil Yusipovich, who was obviously acting in my role while I was away enjoying 4 weeks of leave. Thank you, as well as Shannon, who filled in for yourself, and Lisa and many other managers, well, her managers and other managers who had to chip in and do a bit more. When there's someone missing, everybody else always has to do a bit more. So thank you to you all for that. And as you can see, Director Yusipovich did attend a number of meetings on my behalf, so thank you for that too. Mayor, quickly, I think what this shows yet again is that there is an awful lot going on in our community, and there's been a huge number of successes in our community. I think we've spent, said to Marie Edwards the other day that it feels like we were spending as much time celebrating successes and awarded funding within our community as what we were spending on getting the next lot of successes. It's been a pretty great month since coming back, capped off with things like the Business Awards, which was just a great celebration of the capability of this community and the way that the award winners not only spoke about what they'd achieved, but what all of it, they knew everybody else who they were competing with, and paid due respect to the achievements of everybody else who was involved. So it was just a great night. So I'll leave it at that, Mayor. Happy to answer questions as always.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Any questions from councillors? No? All right, well, we'll take the delegates' reports as done. No, I won't say anything. You've done it all. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to notice of motion, which is here, and it's Councillor Nation. I'll hand it over to you, Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. I move that Mount Alexander Shire acknowledge that urgent and continuing action is needed to address the current and future impacts of climate change on the health, economy and well-being of the people of Mount Alexander Shire and its environment. That all parts of our community, including council, will need to act over many years to reduce emissions to adapt to our changing environment and to manage the predicted increased number and intensities of emergencies, and that there is significant expertise and goodwill within our communities that has been offered to council as identified in the Open Council briefing held on 9 December 2019. And that Mount Alexander Shire Council will act on the urgency by declaring a climate emergency, approving and implementing a roadmap that will lead to zero net emissions for council operations by 2025, ensuring that all actions are informed by cost-benefit analysis to ensure that council invests in actions with the best returns while maintaining its services and a sustainable long-term budget, integrating a climate change lens into council's design and construction of infrastructure, the planning and implementation of services, and the development of policies and strategies, identifies the best ways to engage with the expertise and enthusiasm of our communities, and works with our communities to help reduce our community's greenhouse gas emissions and increase our ability to adapt to climate change, including in the development of council's next climate change strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I have a motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Neelan. Is there any opposition?
Can I just clarify, is that as written or was there a change here?
I hope it was as written. If it wasn't, then that's my mistake.
Okay, I'd like to hear the debate, so I'll indicate at this stage, but I don't support the entire motion, so we'll have a debate.
Thank you, Councillor Patrice. Any other opposition? All right. Well, Councillor, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Yes, please. So, councillors, a quick glance through our committee reports and our council agenda papers will show that we have been consistently discussing and workshopping climate change over the last 3 months. During that time, we have often disagreed, but not about the reality of climate change and the need for actions. Our discussions have led to a much improved motion and a thorough discussion with our community. I thank councillors for persisting with this difficult and often emotional process, and Councillor Lesser in particular for bringing forward the motion that led to last Monday's open session with our community. The main sticking point may be the word emergency, and I will respond to that in my right of reply. Concerns have also been expressed about the cost to council and its ratepayers of declaring a climate emergency. We will be required to spend on climate change anyway, as it will be mandated in the new Local Government Act and in the development of our next health and wellbeing strategy. Indeed, we're already spending on climate change, as so many of our services support the resilience of our communities, which is a necessary characteristic for our community if we are going to be able to adapt and adapt and adapt over decades. Further, we're already spending more money on water and are deploying our emergency services response earlier. This motion will require us to have a sharper focus on our spending decisions. We will need to look through a climate lens. As councillors, we've already been asked what we should be considering funding in our long-term financial plan and in next year's budget. I have framed both of my responses to these requests against a climate change scenario. As a whole organisation, we can do that. Using our knowledge and the wisdom of our community, we can invest our ratepayers' money far more wisely. We won't spend money on things that won't be fit for purpose in 10, 20 or 30 years' time. We won't be spending money on infrastructure that will be seen as white elephants in 10, 20 or 30 years' time. And it might surprise you to know that of all the doubts I have in this, it's about us achieving the zero net emissions. I think we could probably be a bit innovative around that, because rather perhaps than paying for offsetting, future councils may wish to consider investing offsetting money instead back into community efforts. This is my own personal strategy when I offset my flights, and to stop myself feeling too guilty. We have to be wise rather than dogmatic. I mentioned the wisdom of our community. It has been amply demonstrated to us last Monday and over many years. It is not only the wisdom of experts on climate change and energy we'll be seeking it from, it will also include those who are involved in our emergency services, those who understand their communities well, those who understand our economy, and especially the children and young families who will have to cope with this change for decades to come. We have a whole of community, multi-generational challenge ahead of us, and this is the community that can do that. I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll allow applause for this one. I think councillors will actually accept applause for any of the ones we speak to. It doesn't often happen. Now, the seconded John, sorry, Councillor Beeman, would you like to speak now, or yes, speak now? I don't think there's that much. Would you like to wind up the debate, or would you like to speak now?
I've been on about this for the last 25 years or so, but not in a very vigorous way. This provides an opportunity to show and do that we're serious about this. I wrote earlier today the weather station or the monitoring station at Mauna Loa in Hawaii, and on November the 19th in this year ran 407 parts per million of carbon. It's never been that high before in the last 800,000 minus 200 years. So in the last 200 years we've done a lot more damage to the atmosphere than we realised we were doing. That's it.
Councillor.
Okay.
Yeah?
Hang on.
Okay, so would you like to speak now, Councillor Patricia?
Yeah, I'll speak now. Firstly, I want to thank all those that came to the forum, and it was probably the best event we've ever had at council in the time I've been on council. All those that submitted from all sides of the argument, although they were predominantly one side, but everyone had an opportunity to submit should they choose to do so. I want to make a special acknowledgement to the students from St Mary's Primary School and the Castlemaine Secondary College, who spoke in a very positive manner about climate change and the actual actions that they're taking, not just talking about it, but what they're actually doing about it. And I hear a lot of talking and a lot of things, but actions that speak louder than words. So I want to thank all the presenters, and I want to thank our staff that allowed that to all happen and go very, very smoothly. My background is I was a maths, science, English and law student, did further study in science and law at university, so I have no issue with climate change. My issue in relation to the motion is purely on the declaration of a climate emergency, and I'll explain why. We had a recent forum in Bendigo for all local shires with a world expert on litigation risk specifically around climate change. Now, I personally, with Councillor Lesser, spoke to the presenter of that meeting, who is a world expert solicitor, and she said that a declaration may increase council's liability. However, she did also say that if it was carefully managed, it may reduce it, but we don't know. The climate emergencies, which started I think in 2016 at Darebin Council, at this stage has never been tested in VCAT or in a court of law. What could happen for councils but declare an emergency is a complete unknown. We don't know if it'll be negative or positive, but there is a risk that it increases our litigation. to me, there's a lot of political pressure. I spoke to a lot of people in the last few weeks, and a lot of people, it seemed to be more important that we declare an emergency than actually do something. And I am completely the opposite way to that. I think we need to absolutely do something, and I support pretty much the entire motion except for the declaration of a climate emergency, because I think we can do the actions without the declaration. And the declaration can leave us on unknown financial and legal grounds. I don't want us to be the guinea pigs and the first one tested. We just simply don't know what may happen, and we don't know if that'll be negative or positive, and I'm not prepared to vote for something that is an unknown. We could be jumping off a cliff without a parachute, or in fact it may be a really nice landing. We just simply do not know. One of the things that was brought up from the world export expert, and one of the particular items that she said was that finance and governance teams must ensure they have a contemporary understanding of climate-related financial risks. She also stated in her presentation that it was a dynamic issue that's changing almost daily. The reality is that we are the governance team pretty much at Mount Alexander Shire, where the councillors make the final decisions. And I don't think we have a contemporary understanding of the climate-related financial risks at all. I would have preferred to have seen this motion not put forward tonight. The climate forum was a week ago. As councillors, we have not had time since last week to actually properly get together and fully discuss the issues, nor seek expert advice. And so I think we're rushing into it. Nothing would happen if it was put off until the February meeting. Nothing, if it was put forward tonight and passed, it would make no difference if it was done tonight or February, because no action is going to happen before then. So I'm not necessarily completely against it, but I'm against the term, particularly in relation to emergency. The word emergency in the context of climate emergency is taken completely out of the meaning of the word. And I will make one, there has been one thing happening in the last few days, which Eliza has pointed out to me. I think it's actually only about the last 3 days, where the Oxford Dictionary has made the words climate emergency their word of the year. It's actually probably a phrase of the year. And they have suggested an alternative meaning to what that means, which would, in fact, satisfy me a little bit more than the traditional version of emergency, which is an unforeseen event. And climate change is not an unforeseen event. We've known about it since the first World Earth Forum in 1970. So it's not unforeseen, it's not unexpected. We know what's happening, we've just done swear about it. I can't be any more blunt than that, and I won't use the words. Basically, I would rather this be put forward until we get more information and more professional advice. I think we are jumping too early. We don't know what will happen, and I'm not prepared to put my name to something that may have horrible consequences from a financial and legal point of view for council, even though I totally understand the views of all the people here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Petrusa. Who else wishes to speak? Councillor Lesser?
Yeah.
And then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. Yes, I made a few notes. I sat down yesterday morning and had a bit of a think. Okay. Firstly, this has been a personal journey for me. And firstly, I want to thank my fellow councillors for their support to hold a forum. I also want to thank the staff for putting it all together. I had no idea of the amount of work it would involve. Absolutely. And thirdly, I want to thank the climate activists for encouragement and support they gave me. And yes, I know it was somewhat difficult. One of my fellow councillors, my fellow councillor Petrusa over there, made the observation that we as a council/shire should be leaders and not followers. And to some extent, I think that we've done this. The Climate Change Forum was probably a first in the whole community engagement on this topic. Everybody was invited to submit and take part. Yes, I did learn a lot. I changed my views a few times, backwards and forwards. I'm also very cautious about making political statements. But on a local level, I saw the effects of this whole concept of declaring a climate emergency. To me, it brought people together, highlighted awareness about the effects of a changing climate that had especially on the older residents of our community and our children's mental well-being. It also highlighted that more work needs to be done through the local health sector. What do we do and how do we handle code red days and heat waves and catastrophic days? That was one of the things that came through. I attended the fire information session over the weekend, and I saw firsthand the community's confusion regarding fire plans, safe places, places of last resort, etc. And I have pointed out before that I'm a victim of a bushfire a few years ago and lost the house that I built with my family. So I do know the effects of bushfire. Now, the Climate Change Forum and the publicity around it has heightened the community's awareness of a changing climate and its effects. For me, the forum brought the community together in a way I had not seen before. Now, in closing, I'm quoting from one of the submissions, because it's sort of, and I'm in the tobacco, I guess. Central to any action on climate by the Mount Alexander Shire Council must be the most vulnerable in the community and those with the least ability to take individual action. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lasser. Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah. I'm going to speak, so I'm going to wing it. I suppose, sort of heard the term for arguments. Is it an emergency? Yes, no, who knows? There's no doubt the climate is warming. We do need to take action. Half of Australia is currently on fire, and I think that we as a Shire are staring down a very serious fire risk this year in particular. I know where I live, dam's just about dry and not much grass, and like that code red did shake a few people. Will it cost any more if we declare a climate emergency? Well, the reality is it's going to cost anyway. I think that if at least we plan for it and prepare for it, it might actually cost less in the long run. Will it make a difference if we declare a climate emergency and the carbons will come down and everyone will live in a nice, cooler place? No, it won't. All we can do is influence and make a difference in our area. So for me, I suppose what it comes down to in this particular motion is that as a council we can show leadership, we can put it out there to our community that this is a serious issue and we need to be much more serious when we talk about things like fire, water, and how we adapt, and we need to plan and adapt with our community who are already doing lots of great things. But I suppose the thing that it comes down to me personally is I have to look my 16-year-old child in the eye and I would have to tell him why I didn't vote for it. And there is no reason why I could do that. We need to support our children in this because we'll all be dead soon. It's not our future, I'm sorry, and I'm younger. It's not our future we're talking about, it's our children.
Thank you. Councillor Cordy, do you wish to speak? Councillor, would you like to write a reply? I think I knew the name of the voice when I heard it again. Thank you. Please, Councillor Rachel.
Thank you, and I thank all councillors, and I thank particularly Councillor Trusma, your steadfast clarity around this has eminently improved what we are coming up with. I really understand the concerns around the word emergency. I think liability is something that we're going to face regardless or not of whether we declare a climate emergency, and in fact, one of the other answers as Barker gave, was that by declaring a climate emergency, we are alerting our community to the fact that there are risks. As we do know that there's more and more pressure from financing organisations, legal organisations that are saying unless you are acting on climate and are really focusing on it, it's going to be much harder to get insured. That's applying to councils as well. And councils are being sued now on climate change issues without having declared an emergency. So, you know, the comfort I hope to offer you in this is that there are many councils ahead of us who've already declared this, and they are not being taken to law. I really do, however, respect your point of view on that. Actions are already happening, councillors. Before February, we are going to be really looking at our budget. This is a real time to start thinking about this. So, yeah, it does matter that we declare it now. It's a very complex world. There's no certainty. There's absolutely no certainty about this, how this planet is going to keep reacting if we keep assaulting it with heat. No certainty. The predictions that we have from the CSIRO, and I thank John Clark from the CSIRO for coming to our forum, do not include any potential tipping points, and the science is already picking up where tipping points are happening. So it's not as though we can say, yep, we know what it's going to happen in the next 30 years. We don't. We have an indication. It's going to be hotter, going to be more emergency days, there's going to be less rain. We already know that for every major heat wave, Victoria loses $300 million off its agricultural productivity. We already know that the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which you'd have to say is probably not the most green organisation, or in fact socially conscious organisation, has found it's expecting a 40% drop in agricultural production in dairy, wheat and beef. So we know some things are likely, we have to prepare for it. And really, for our children, the school strikers who have asked that we declare a climate emergency, kids, this is for you.
Thank you, councillors. I think I've heard from all councillors who wish to speak, so I'm now putting the motion. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? Calling for a division? Are you calling for a division? No one's calling for a division. It's all right, we don't have to name names. We've passed. Thank you. So no motion special business. So we do have a confidential matter, contractual matter, and so we will ask that everyone leaves us. So thank you for coming.
So much.